Welcome to Every Friday with Dan and Olivia. I'm Dan Miles.
And I'm Olivia Dalbo. Hi.
So this week, in the fine tradition of such past listener participation shows as Cherish versus Respect, First Music Purchases, Where Would You Rather Live, and Good Word, Bad Word, we're going to be sharing your responses to a particular topic that we proposed. It seems like the first time we ever did this, I read all the responses myself. Then on subsequent occasions, Tom, Olivia, and I shared the responsibility. So this time around, I thought it would be a cool idea to just have Olivia read all the answers.
I'm going to have a lot to say in this episode. I'm definitely feeling up for the task.
Why don't you start off by reminding us what the topic is?
The topic is a really lovely topic, and it's a very, it can be a very profound topic, simple topic, happiness. What happiness means to all of our listeners, which, interestingly enough, having read through these, we've got a very diverse yet simple, what seems as simple, it's a very, very diverse subject matter to get people's responses on. And it's amazing to me how involved people have got with these answers.
Can't wait to hear what they had to say.
Well, our first listener who has written in, and very kindly, is the lovely Renee McKay. Hello, Renee. I hope that that your first day back at school, well, I happen to know it was a great experience for you, and I'm sure you had some happiness on that particular day. So happiness to you, Renee, you're saying is so subjective. Every individual has their own version. You're saying, as I've gotten older, I have realized, though happiness really does come from within, your own attitude is the fuel that determines the trajectory of your own happiness. That attitude is something that you have to consciously wear every day like a piece of clothing. As someone who struggles with depression, seeking happiness is a daily work of heart. I think that I have found that having a grateful heart has opened my eyes to the constant barrage of little joys sprinkled through our day, if only we look for them. I believe that happiness is made up of millions of the little things that make us feel good and special and loved. And it is imperative that we spread that happiness to all those around us. It is truly contagious. That the world needs it more than ever right now. Thank you for letting me share. I hope that you are both enjoying some happiness yourselves. And we are indeed, Renee. Thank you so much. That was a great take on this little word, happiness.
I like when she uses the expression work of heart instead of work of art.
Yeah, me too. And it's so true. I mean, I think the more you stay in touch with and recognize if you're coming from your heart, if you're making a decision from your heart, if you're connecting with somebody or having a discussion with somebody from your heart, then you actually really you're making a conscientious effort to come from that place, and you know the difference between whether you're in your heart or not in your heart. Then that's a great undertaking, and it's a great thing to master. But once you have mastered it, you can very well create happiness in your life rather than something not be happy because you can be a technician about it. So I get a sense that you've become a technician about, really taking control of your life and happiness in your life and your mood, and that you've empowered yourself enough to really learn that you're capable of doing that. And I'm really glad that we're talking about this, because anyone who's listening right now, I kind of challenge you all to take on a little bit of that attitude as well, that we all suffer from depression sometimes. It comes up, and it's not necessarily about taking a pill to make it go away. But if you take it that stage further and challenge yourself, wait a minute, I don't necessarily, yes, I am feeling like this, but maybe I can make a slight adjustment and go more into my heart, or maybe this lingering feeling won't last quite as long this time.
Yes, well said. And she also mentions happiness being contagious. I've heard the expression laughter is contagious. It's true. If a bunch of people are laughing, it's kind of contagious. You start to laugh. Happiness is contagious. I wonder a little bit. I think she's probably right, but I know some people, if they're like unhappy, being around happy people just kind of rubs it in. You know what I mean? It's like if you're like a Grinch and you don't like Christmas, and a bunch of people around you like, Christmas, woohoo! Like makes them even grinchier. So I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't dispute what she's saying, and also, she says that your attitude is the fuel that determines the trajectory of your happiness. So the connection between happiness and attitude. If you try and have a positive attitude, you're more likely to get in a happy mode than if you start out arms folded, angry, like make me happy. I challenge you. I dare you. So it's true. Your attitude is, important. So she had a great response to start us off here.
The next one is from Shell Beckwith. Hello, Shell. How are you, love? What do you have to say on happiness? You say, happiness for me, it would be being inside with my wife and pups on a bad weather day, all comfortable and relaxed, curled up in my favorite big overstuffed recliner, totally engrossed in a fantastic book. It just doesn't get any better. That sounds so cozy and fun. When I read this, it was kind of short and sweet what you wrote, but so concise and to the point that it was very visceral to me. So thank you for your answer.
The one thing that kind of concerns me about that is saying his ideal scenario is reading a book, not listening to our podcast. Come on, man.
But that goes without saying. I mean, come on. Has Shell ever not written a lovely review on our show and genuinely meant it?
Shell is a super fan. He has been. He's been with me since early Friends of Dan, probably around episode 20 or less. So he's been with me for 7 years. He loves every Friday. He loves you, and he supports me. And he's very much the family man, very much loves the animals, and been around enough to kind of know, what I take away from that is just the simple things. Some people, they imagine happiness has to be something grand and gigantic and huge, winning the Oscar, catching the touchdown in the Super Bowl. He's like, give me a book and my dogs and my wife and a quiet evening, and I'm happy. And set your sights at things that are attainable. It's actually kind of wise.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. But it reminds me, I think happiness changes. It does, like Renee was saying, as time goes on, you change. And so, of course, your feelings are going to change and your state of mind are going to change. It reminds me of how the word success changes, in your mind. I think initially, when you're in the more narcissistic point of your life, when you're much younger, and you think the kind of world revolves around you, and you have a tenacity for success in a different way, and you think that it's very much related to power and money, and you can just never get enough of that if you just stay on that level. Do you know what I'm saying? I would think it becomes a little monotonous. To me, the biggest success in my life is seeing my son grow up and knowing that he's finding his way now in the world, going to college, and that's success, that he's okay, that he can deal with himself out in the big bad world, that he's been raised in a way where he hasn't been too sheltered or too in a bubble where he's going out there being, too entitled, because that's a really hard knock to take when your parents have not necessarily set you up for what it's really like out there. It ultimately ends up being harder for a young person. But in terms of happiness, I think that your view on that changes as it does with success.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up success. I don't know what this says about me, but as I was accumulating this stuff, I didn't really think in terms of success. And it's kind of an obvious thing. Maybe I should have been thinking that way. Because you think about a lot of people that are quote-unquote successful that are not quote-unquote happy. You know what I mean? Maybe they've given up the wrong things to achieve their success. In a lot of different categories you can think of. And you think, wow, that person over there, you think they've got it made. They have material things, or they have attained titles or these different things, and they just seem like a miserable person. So you just never know.
Moving right along here, our next response is by Paula Brewer. And Paula says, what does happiness mean to you? It is important to me, and I searched till I found it, ! Doesn't include money, but I think when you don't have stress of the regular bills, it helps. How would you define happiness? To have calm and inner peace? Not major daily fighting and some laughs mixed in, basically enjoying what life brings out and not being negative. What are your experiences with happiness? I had a good childhood for the most part, but I did have a dad who was like Jekyll and Hyde, balanced with a loving, quiet mother. My brother and I once kept track daily how long of a time went without my dad yelling, most of the time loudly, about something. After he yelled daily for a year and a half, we gave up keeping track. The problem was he could be very good too, so this was what I grew up with. And I told myself I won't settle for a fighting all the time relationship. I just want to enjoy life and laugh and just be. And I found it in Scott. We have been together for 21 years and going strong. Also, for happiness, it must include a pet or two. And I totally agree with that, by the way. I think having a pet, funnily enough, a lot of people bring it up when you have a close relative in the family who dies, for example. A lot of people tend to say, hey, get a pet. If your dog dies, get another dog. I'm a little on the fence about that because, I did have a dog that died and I just wasn't able to replace him. And I don't know if I ever will. But it's bringing in another energy, something that can bring you joy, it lights up your day, waking up with just a cute, little, lovely dog or cat that sort of is curled up beside you and it's something about their smell and also they're just so loyal. They're always there. And so that's an incredible thing to experience. And I think it's definitely a selling point to people to have, hey, if I have that in my life, that consistency, it'll definitely help perk up my mood. And obviously great relationships. I agree with what we just read that, if you know yourself well enough, you know what your childhood is, and you can learn from that and turn what was potentially at times maybe a little bit rough around the edges. But you know that parent loved you. You can get through it. I mean, none of us have completely perfect childhoods. But what we take from that, I think we can then, weigh the odds and go, hey, this is what I really responded to. And this is a gray area that maybe I don't want to, recreate in my adult life. So we learn from that and we get wise from that. Our next listener is Gino Fratto, who says, happiness, I think, is having family and friends that love you unconditionally and doing what you love as often as possible. Absolutely, hands down, agree with that. Since my mum passed away, the family that I do have, and I have luckily a very big family, and I have some wonderful friends. I don't have a zillion friends. When I was younger, I did have a zillion friends, and I realized they're not all friends. A large degree of them are, acquaintances, and the thing about acquaintances is they take up a lot of your time. And if it's not somebody that's in front of you, you can necessarily really let your guard down and just reveal everything because they know you, inside out and them inside out. And then your communication is, you can have intimacy with them and really connect. That really keeps you present. And then I think you can't make old friends. I mean, the great thing about old friends is that they've seen you go through each decade, and as you continue to grow, you grow together, and they're a great check-in point, for both parties. It's like they can say, that's not you, and this person isn't for you. And obviously you take, if you're in a relationship, a grain of salt in terms of what they say sometimes if you don't necessarily agree with them. And then sometimes in hindsight, if you've broken up with somebody that you were with, you may say, oh, you know what, that person did always tell me that person was wrong for me and they were right, but I didn't see it at the time. But I think that's absolutely true. Really good friends and family are a huge asset to you having complete happiness in your life, and they keep you balanced.
Well, I would agree that a zillion friends is too many. That's why I always cap it at half a zillion. About half a zillion friends is about right. Yeah. I've never had to worry about that. But Gino, he says really two things. He says having family and friends that love you unconditionally, it gives him a sort of comfort level and a degree of happiness. And also, he says doing what you love as often as possible. That's interesting.
That's really registers with me. I think that's kind of a deep phrase right there because, I'm sure that as a species, we have many things. We have fishing. I like kayaking, or I like, you can categorize it into athletic things, or, going for walks, but what is it that really, that you come back from an experience? Like for me, it's going and seeing horses. And, I have this thing called horse breath, it's not a thing. It's like when you get by a horse, if you get by their nostrils, and this is just me, and I might sound like a complete quack, but I feel so peaceful when I'm around horses. they're the oldest archetype that we have as far as animals. And so that's a really significant thing of going and doing something I really love, as is music, as is, I love going for really lovely walks, especially in the fall. There's specific things that are linked with the elements or animals or places that I know that I go, that every time I go there, it's going to ignite a feeling and give me a sense of inner peace that maybe I'm a little bereft of in that particular time. But it's really knowing yourself and challenging yourself to get to the nitty gritty of what those finite things are, because they can't be sort of 20 things, because nobody has that time. It's really maybe, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that just really will probably elongate your life, because they're not only stress reducers, but they just bring you back down to ground zero.
Well, what I like about the way he phrased it is he's being realistic. He's saying you can't get up and do everything you love to do all day long, but if you can do it as much as possible, acknowledging you can't do it all the time. In my opinion, it helps you appreciate things, because I have this issue with my hand. Like I have hand fatigue when I play the piano now. I just can't go for 6 hours like I used to. And so it helps me appreciate that I can even do it, And so that's what I take out of it. He's basically saying, because he's a drummer, he's a pro drummer. So I'm sure he loves to play his drums, and as much drumming as he gets in, that's where he finds his happiness. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of these decisions are predicated on what lights you up, what lights your soul up, what constantly reminds you of who you really are, because it's easy to get lost in the world with challenges that we face and how much we multitask. We can get more in our head, or we can get get anxiety from things that, you think, wait a second, do I really need to be feeling this anxiety right now? And what can I do to just get back to, loving life?
True.
And how lucky I feel to be alive, and that life is a gift. So let's move on to Gil Baker, who has a very succinct and short answer, which is accomplishment.
What does happiness mean to you? He says it means accomplishment, and he does not embellish. He just gives us one word. So what do you think about that? Accomplishment. Accomplishing things is where happiness lies, he says.
I think that to me, again, there's no right or wrong answer with these, and I love that they're so diverse and subjective to the listener. I think that what it reminds me of is, if you were to, for me, success used to mean accomplishment. And we were talking about that a little bit earlier on, kind of comparing happiness and success, and how, both those two categories and subject matters, I think, change over time. They either become more clear and more specific, such as Gil's. You clearly, Gil, know what it is that makes you happy. And I think that's great. I think as long as you know what it is, if it's one word or a phrase or a paragraph, what does it mean to you? What is it? And everybody's different. And it's just so indicative that no person on the face of the earth is like any other person. Everybody's really super special. And, we're all unicorns, Dan. What can I tell you?
Interestingly, we have another response coming up a little later that was also one word, but it was a different word. So it'd be interesting to see what that person's word was. Gil is a professional filmmaker. So you got to figure, what does accomplishment mean to him? Probably finishing a film.
Yeah, no, I think following through with things is a very succinct route to happiness in many regards. I especially, because it feels good, because how many of us start something that we only finish 70% of it, or, we can't get to that last stage, where with the follow through, it's like without that follow through, we can get to 70%, but if we don't have that last 30, it doesn't get to where it ultimately needs to get to. So then is the 70% a waste of time? So I completely understand. For me, it's a few more things other than just accomplishment, but metaphorically, accomplishment could mean all of those other things as well. So it's an interesting answer. Let's go on to Larry Gani. Happiness is a warm gun, bang, bang, shoot, shoot. Money cannot buy happiness, but it can buy away some unhappiness. I found that as I get a little older, happiness comes with doing things I love to do with people I love spending time with. If only I had more time to do those things. I think that when I was younger, I pursued things that I thought would make me happy because the world I knew taught me so. It took a long time for me to understand that an individual's happiness is his or her own. Well said.
Yeah, I won't get too deep into it, but I'm sure a lot of people find themselves in a situation. I married someone who put the burden on me to deliver her happiness, and I heard about it all day long. You know what I mean? And so I understand what Larry means. You're responsible for your own happiness. If you're unhappy, don't get a list of enemies that are causing your unhappiness. You know, I don't know if that's how he means it, but that's how I took it when I read it. And of course, happiness is a warm gun, bang, bang, shoot, shoot. Beatles' White Album.
I did not know that. Thank you for lightening me, Larry and Dan. I definitely agree with pretty much everything that's in here. And I think, yeah, gosh, that just comes with life experience and wisdom, that, we can play the blame game until we're blue in the face. I think the sooner we get honest and realize there is no out there for one's behavior and actions. And, a lot of stuff that we attract to us is really based on the frame of mind that we're in and whether if we are completely miserable at the time, it's going to be pretty self-explanatory why that energetic stuff is coming back to you. So, which is why it's so important that we really get closer to our ideals of what happiness mean personally to us, because then we can really do that in a work of shifting what we are bringing our way. So, I love all of these answers. Let's go on to Tina McManaman. Happiness, having all my kids home at the same time, being with old friends, being loved, being myself. That is happiness. Amen to that, Tina. I think that's pretty deep, pithy, and profound. Being loved, being yourself, being with old friends. And I think, again, like I was saying, you can't make old friends people that you've known 20 years, since you were a kid into your 20s, into your 30s, and so on and so forth. It's a checking point. It's like when you are with old friends, you realize, because you can't, they know who you truly are, and they're going to love you, and they're still in your life at that stage because they love you no matter what. They accept you with your flaws and with all your other qualities, and hopefully you're, they're usually a huge part of what kind of helps balance you out. And being with old friends is like a litmus test for sort of, where you are. And so you can be yourself when you're around old friends, and you do feel loved when you're around old friends. And, your children, ultimately over time, that's kind of like family is like being with old friends. But yeah, I think a lot of what you say is definitely rings home to me. What about you, Dan?
Well, when she says having all my kids home, it makes me wonder how many kids she has, because she has to have at least 3, right? Because if you had 1 kid, you wouldn't say all. If you had 2, you would say both. So if you say all my kids, it's got to be at least 3. So I'll have to hit her up.
It could be 8. It could be 8 because she's magnanimous.
She is. She's Tina Magnanimous. Honestly, what jumped out to me about her answer was she said being herself. Because I'm the type of person, I kind of take it for granted that I'm able to do that. But I think there are people who probably feel like maybe they can't. Like, they can't be themselves. Maybe they want to be a certain way, and for whatever reason they can't. Maybe the environment in their home is like, a library. Be quiet, stop being so loud. And they want to be loud. Or maybe they want to be the quiet bookworm and they have a boisterous environment. You know what I mean? Or maybe it's a person with a sexual identity thing, and, they want to be themselves, quote unquote, and they feel like they have to put a performance on for people. So, I think one reason I've done podcasting is I have sort of a defined personality that I don't even think about. I just am myself, I don't wish anybody any ill, so I'm never worried about saying the wrong thing. I like to have the attention on other people more so than myself, which is why I have a co-host for this show, and why the focal point of my other show is interviewing other people besides myself. So right. I'm not like, it's the Dan show. I'm going to speak to you for 2 hours. Listen, you lucky audience. It's not my thing. So, but I appreciate what she says. She finds happiness in being herself. And, as with everybody else, she adds other dimensions to it. She having her kids in the house. That's a big one for like empty nesters and grandparents, So, they have 300 whatever days of the year, no kids in the house. And then Thanksgiving or Christmas rolls around and they have 3 or 4 kids and some grandkids. And that's happiness to them. And I totally get that. I mean, you're in the film industry. How many projects have you been involved in where that's sort of the theme of the whole, film?
Yeah, definitely. I think as one does get older, it changes and it does become more simple because you've really discovered through your life and with who you are that a large degree of you're kind of your kids are a reflection of you, and if they're happy, you're happy. Your friends, you can share in their joys. If they're getting married or they've just had a baby or they get a great new job, those are the people that you want to celebrate and support. You want to celebrate with them. So that's what celebrating is about. It's about togetherness. That's why holidays is about family getting together, because it's like a tribal thing of you celebrating that particular holiday or that meal, or it brings us back to that primitive sense of ritualistic, tribal stuff, which I love.
True.
Yeah, it's sacred and it's sort of part of what we humans need, on a very simple level, congregating. All right, well, let's go on to our next listener, Chris Stanton. Hello, Chris. I hope all is well with you in the UK. Happiness means to me that someone I like is happy with me for something that I did. Yeah, I agree with that.
Someone he likes is happy for something he did. Yeah, I get that. It's along the lines of what some other people have said about finding their happiness and pleasing others. One thing I want to mention about Chris is that he has on Facebook a Olivia Dabo fan page and a Arnold Schwarzenegger fan page.
Oh, which I did not know that.
Which I promised I would mention to everybody if you want to check those out for sure. Chris has contributed, I think, to every listener deal we've had.
And Chris, as always, you're nothing but sweetness and kindness, and you put that out into the world. So I think that I need to let you know that you make others happy all the time. And so then I'm happy to know through your quote that it makes you happy to know you make others happy. So it's just a revolving circle of happiness with you, me, and everybody, Chris. What can I tell you? We're going to move on now to Ron Nelson. And Ron's answer is, I think I get true happiness from seeing animals truly happy. It gives me a great feeling. I completely agree with that. I think, again, it sort of falls almost into that thing of serving. But, I mean, you don't think about it when you think about an animal, like, these animals that have died as well or been hurt as well as the people in the hurricane in Texas. I was just recently watching on the television these squirrels that were rescued. And I thought, it's so great because so many people think of squirrels as the way they do of bats, per se, that there's too many of them and they're rodents and they're pests. And, then you see, this little squirrel being sort of, fed milk by a little, sucker. And you've got these veterinarians or whoever are contributing to that, and, to me, animals are just as important as human beings. And if anything, we have just as much to learn from them, because they can't talk. They can't sit there and have a conversation with you. It's merely whatever they're giving. But yet they do speak their own language. And it's sort of, if we're sensitive enough to kind of lean into them and go, okay, they're an animal. How can I better understand them? They have some really amazing qualities. And I agree. I'm an animal lover. And I love when I know that animals are happy and not scared. And I see them in their own environment and habitat. And they have as much space as they really need for the kind of animal that they are. And they're eating. They have enough to eat. And that, that there's nothing that makes me sadder with animals where I feel like they're pushed out of their own natural habitat because there's no more space for them, So, I get a lot of happiness through animals myself as well.
Well, Ron is a big time animal lover. Also speaking of Facebook, he has a lot of animal related posts and everything. But they're guileless. They're natural. They're very, they wear their heart on their sleeve, so to speak. They're not deceptive. Yeah. They're innocent in a lot of ways, and it's almost like when you're around children. When you're around children, they're not the way an adult human is, multi-layered and stuff. When they enjoy something, they really enjoy it. And a lot of, particularly when you talk about animals that are pets, a lot of them are very loyal to their owners. And there's as someone said earlier, I think Gino, knowing you're unconditionally loved by your friends and family. Well, for a lot of people, knowing they're unconditionally loved by their pet has a lot of value too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, there's a lot of people that, for whatever reason, didn't have children or can't have children, and they have pets instead. And, they get just as much as they would out of raising a puppy or an iguana or, animals of that likeness than that they would out of a child, And so, yeah, they have so much to give us. We have so much to gain from having animals in our lives. Happiness has a lot to do with animals. We've definitely concurred on that topic. Bob Wilson says that happiness is fleeting and based on circumstances. Inner peace can be based on deeper values and not change with the wind. It's hard to grasp, though.
So he's drawing a distinction. He's saying what he calls inner peace is a little different than maybe like a more transitory type happiness. This show I like is going to be back on the air next month. I'm happy. He's talking about like sort of the deepest, most profound type of happiness that maybe people don't even try for. I think that's what he means by inner peace, more sort of like a Buddhist kind of thing.
But what do you think about happiness being fleeting and based on circumstances?
I think there's some truth to that. One of my sort of conclusions about it, when he says it's fleeting, is that nothing, I think in life is a constant state. You know what I mean? And so, and at a certain level, everything is fleeting.
Everything changes, though, right?
Yeah.
So I would think to you, Bob, if you're aware that it's fleeting and based on circumstances, when you do have those moments of sheer happiness, knowing in the back of your head that it is fleeting, I bet you just milk those moments, more than the average duck, because I think, when we bring things that we think are relevant to you get as specific as you are about happiness, something that you happen to know in the back of your head that's kind of a constant reminder, it must make those moments of happiness that much more special to you. And I definitely agree with the inner peace can be based on deeper values and not change with the wind. But I think, we all, sometimes, if we get too labored with the fact that happiness is fleeting, does it sometimes prevent us from having, if we think it's hard to grasp, it's almost like, I think what we all could really use is leaning into happiness, just to try and find a moment of even though it is fleeting, because everything changes and we all eventually die, though it's a morbid thought, but it's like even that, knowing that we eventually die, that could be a morbid thought, or does it have to be a morbid thought? While we're here, find something joyous every day, and in the simplest things, by just lift it, just looking at something that you love, whether it's a piece of artwork that changes your mood, or finding, I find that I challenge myself to try and really empower myself that I can change my mood, that I can find moments of happiness, even if they don't present themselves, that I can myself provide myself with the knowledge to go and do things that are going to bring me joy. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And I know they're hard to grasp, though, but I try to not linger so much on that. It's just a choice how you want to feel, and life is all about your mood, and we are in control of that. It's our brain, it's our mind, and we don't have control of the way the world is going to be, but we do have control of how we show up in the world. And the way that we have control over that is we can make a decision about how we want to show up in the world. So, yeah, that's what I'd have to just say, my last little tidbit on that. But it's a great, great quote that you wrote, and it's very insightful. And so thank you, Bob.
And much of what you just said is similar to what Renee said in the very first response about the importance of your attitude and, finding, like you say, the little joys and little things and being open to it. And when he says, deeper values, I guess what he's saying is like, if you work on yourself as a person, the better a person you make yourself be, maybe the more meaningful your level of happiness will be. I think, in other words, if you work on your spiritual life, and you try to have, for a shorthand, we'll just say the best possible morals, maybe you'll have a deeper and richer happiness in life. And if you have, like, let's say more of a hedonistic outlook on life, or just quick, shallow pleasures, I think that's what he means by deeper values.
Yeah, I understand that. And to give you just an example of sort of like something that just struck me today is that, we've had this heat wave in LA for about a week, and it's been somewhat oppressive to say the least. And something that made me so happy today, that surprised me, it was a feeling that I was able to really embellish and embrace the feeling, because I'd never felt it before, but yet I recognized that it was happiness, and it was from the simplest thing, and it came out of this heat wave and the oppressiveness that this heat has created, and it suddenly started to get cloudy and spit, and there were leaves that suddenly blew into the pool after the pool had been pristine, and it was something changed, and it was the weather, and it changed my mood, and it suddenly clouded over, and it was like through all this oppressive heat, suddenly there was rain, and it's funny, I was texting my friend Sarah and another friend of mine, who we were all like, oh my God, I'm suddenly so happy because I get to take a walk. I get to go back outside again after a week of this oppressive heat and actually not be sweating, my life, not feel like there's I'm just drenched in sweat, that I can actually go and take a walk again. So that sense of things that we maybe take for granted, that we didn't realize made us so happy, like taking a walk, which was something that I mentioned before that I really love to do, that brings me happiness. It was like kind of given back to me. So I appreciated it that much more. And and it's just because I was kind of looking around at the sky and noticing what was really out there. So, just a little thing like that, things like that are so simple can bring one extreme happiness. It's not what maybe the majority of the world would think, like, oh, well, that's not winning the lottery. Well, no, it isn't. But it was a break from this horrific heat that we've been having that kind of brought me back to sort of ground zero again, and just made me feel good. So let's go on now to Kevin Rankin. Happiness is driven by fulfillment for me. I want to have life experiences, spontaneous and planned. I only find comfort in money or things if they come without added stress and drama. Seems like a lot to ask for, but achievable. I refuse to exist in a world where I can't create my own happiness. I've worked jobs that took years off my life and caused me stress, and will never do it again. Happiness is knowing I'm getting every ounce out of life that I can! ! Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that's a really insightful way of putting it, and I know it's personal to you, Kevin. When we work jobs that take off years of our life, I mean, there's nothing that's worth your precious life, your precious time that you could otherwise be doing other things, and everybody has to work. I mean, it's one of the necessities of life, to survive. And furthermore, work can offer a lot of other positive things, like, create and establish discipline and your work ethic that's going to set you up for the rest of your life. I started working really young in the workforce, and so it taught me a lot, but then again, we have to weigh the difference of like when that becomes too much and when it overwhelms what our normal threshold is. And, we haven't taken a vacation in 10 years, and you go, well, am I going to get to the point where it's going to be too late to take a vacation so that I can't actually enjoy myself and I can't, walk the mountainous trail of Mount Titicaca or wherever I've always wanted to go in Peru, or see the animals in the Galapagos, because they're extinct now. I mean, how long does one want to wait until you come to that epiphany? And I think it's really vital to recognize that as much as we possibly can. So that really speaks volumes to me. I think we're living in a time now where a lot of people don't, people can't afford to take vacations. But be that as it may, there's still things that we can do to take a time out, to take a road trip, if maybe your budget it's not carved out for going to Tahiti, we have to sort of challenge ourselves to do what we can to supply ourselves with our reservoir, to gas up again and to do it in a joyous way. We're going to go on to Kira Radliff. Happiness is measuring once and not having to cut twice, just simply getting it on the first shot. I'm defining this throughout the lens of our current kitchen remodel, which we also have the distinct challenge of living in simultaneously. The ratio of things going as visualized and things that show up with a hefty addition to your timeline is heavily weighted in the enemy's corner, but we celebrate the small wins and they tally up to what I would call happiness. Wow, that's a wordful. That's going to take me a little bit of time to process, but it's very profound and pithy. I like it.
She's saying,
what do you think, Dan?
She's saying they're remodeling their kitchen while they're also trying to use it as a kitchen. And when she says, the odds are stacked against them, it's heavily weighted in the enemy's corner, but they're thankful for the little victories. I understand what she means. Sometimes she's bringing it down to a finite example of a kitchen remodel. But I think what she's really saying is when you're in a situation where you do feel like, what's the expression? God only gives you what you can handle, But I guess when you feel like, gosh, why is all this stuff happening? Be aware of and thankful for your little victories in life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, it's interesting to me, you're able to, Kira, personalize this. And it's interesting that you bring up remodeling your kitchen whilst living in it. So it's almost like you're going through the experiences of it actually. You're transitioning into this new kitchen while you're sort of letting the other one go. And that's very, it's kind of like you're part of that transition, and something in you is transitioning as alongside of your kitchen. It's metaphorically really interesting. Cool answer. I mean, they're also different. That's what I love. They're also different, and one has to really weigh in on. Wow, I'd never really applied that to happiness, but it's so I get it. So Travis J. Coleman says, right now, happiness is being in my own space, surrounded by people who care for me and about me, and I care for and about them, and have the reciprocation of that. I really like that.
I'm impressed by your pronunciation of reciprocation. Very good.
Are you? And why is that?
I just like the way that came out.
Yes, I know. Happiness to me is being articulate, being able to say big words and get them out properly.
Happiness to me is the listeners and Olivia doing all the heavy lifting on this episode.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm sweating over here. Jesus Christ, it's hot again, and I don't have the air conditioner on, and oh my God. Yeah, that's a really concise answer, and it's really well put into the point. And I'm kind of at that place right now myself, Travis J. Coleman, in the reciprocation of that. I mean,
well, one thing I'll add about Travis, when he's talking about right now, he's recently moved, and he's recently had some upheaval in his family, and he's recently had cataract surgery. So this is what I'm talking about when a person has a lot on their plate all at once, And you mentioned earlier about Bob saying happiness is fleeting and dependent on circumstances. It's easier to be happy when you're all settled in and you got money and no real problems and your eyes are fine. Now all these things get pulled out from under you. Maybe it's a little bit more of a challenge to be happy. So, that's something to consider.
But again, what I get from it is that, in the way that I feel like happiness changes and it kind of reminded me of, how the word success changed in my mind through time, and success now means something much more simple. It's the appreciation for little things, and sometimes it is circumstantial, very much so, because it's the circumstance that brings you to that epiphany where you go, oh, you know what? It's not this and this and this and this. It's just where I am right now, where you're just, with yourself, or these people who are showing up for you. And you suddenly have this hit of, wow, yeah, I'm really loved and I'm really taken care of. And I kind of always have been. And, maybe I've always had this fear that, maybe nobody would show up for me. Sometimes, it's my mother, who just passed last April. When she was really, really sick, she was always surprised she got cancer twice, and the second time, obviously, it didn't go so good. But I remember the first time, the amount of people that showed up and brought her flowers and came to the door and brought her food. And, she just had no idea that she was so beloved. And, I think it's a beautiful thing when sometimes you have to do nothing other than show up, and things they just prevail. Travis, is getting over this thing, and he's got people surrounding him right now and what have you. And so, yeah, I think appreciation is a huge part of happiness for me.
Let's segue over to the next one.
Kevin Mitchell says, I can't really explain what happiness feels like. I wish I could tell you, but I'm going to be honest and just tell you that I can't really remember what happiness feels like. It's not something I'm very optimistic that I'll ever feel again. I have feelings, but none so strong that they could really be happiness. Maybe being with my dog and seeing her be happy. I'm not optimistic about feeling happiness again because I'm old, and I think happiness is something that truly belongs to the young. And as guardians, we need to protect the young and make their lives as good as possible, because only they can feel true, real happiness. Happiness is being young. Well, Kevin.
I appreciate his honesty, but based on how this whole episode's been going, we have to completely disagree. I mean, happiness is not limited to young people.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's all subjective. I think that might be a little bit of a trap to fall into, that I suppose we could, all feel. But again, it's a feeling that, maybe there's a different kind of happiness. That maybe it's not going to be the same kind of happiness, Kevin, that you feel through being young, that you can feel now, but I can promise you from the bottom of my heart that there is still happiness for you to feel. I mean, if you feel it with your dog, I'm sure it's a different kind of happiness that you feel with your dog that maybe it was when you were, a boy with your dog. But I challenge you to go out and just find other things that make you feel happy. And, there's ways that we can feel happy even if we're completely alone with ourselves and not sharing it with other people, though it's fun to share it with other people as well. But maybe new things, like, have you ever been scuba diving and seen the most amazing colors in your life of, electric blues and violets and hot pinks and oranges and yellows? And there's just so many things to still discover in life until you take your last breath, I believe. And I think, we have to go out and we have to seek them.
Well, Kevin is a musician, and he's a good musician. And I know that music brings him enjoyment. And Kevin, you're not that old. He says, I'm old. Yeah. He's not a teenager, but, hey, from my perspective, and now that I'm 54 as to what's old and young. But the main thing I want to say is that, we've done these type of episodes in the past. And we got, as everybody's heard, we got, substantial amount of responses, but we did get fewer responses than we have in the past for two reasons. Some people told me, I can't really articulate or put into words what I think happiness is. So they sort of declined for that reason. They didn't really have an answer. And the other thing is some people maybe just, like you say, it's momentarily at this particular point in time, they don't really feel happy or optimistic, or to the extent that they want to come on the show and brag about it. Or I mean, we all get, honestly, if you hit me at a particular moment, I might be a little bit down. I think Kevin was a little bit down when he sent that response, and I will check in with him, and I'll bet you that he can bounce back for sure. But I appreciate his response for that reason, because it is sort of on par with some of the other sort of off the record responses I've got from people, that didn't send us an actual response, but just kind of said, I'm just not feeling, happy right now. I don't really want to talk about a happy episode. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, but then that's completely normal. It's just part of the ebbs and tides of life. And we feel happy, we feel sad. We could do a whole show about, hey, man, what does sadness mean to you? And would we have more answers? I wonder.
But I agree with what Kevin says, and how you sort of restated what he said, which is that when you are young and you don't really have a conception that you're ever going to die, you feel kind of immortal,
invincible,
and your path hasn't been laid out. You don't really have a lot of regrets about, I should have done this or I should have done that. You feel like, quote unquote, life is before you. Maybe you're in your physical peak or your physical prime, and as you get older, you can't necessarily recapture that. And, maybe childhood is a sort of sacred, blessed time and everything. But as you say, you have to look at the pros and cons of all situations. I'm much wiser now than I was at 17 or 18. And I will go ahead and say, I think I'm a better musician now. A lot of people think, well, you peak at 20, or by 30, you can't be a songwriter anymore. Your best, your prime years. No, I mean, on the end of the last episode, I mentioned Steely Dan. Those guys did Asia in their 20s. The first Beatle to turn 30 was Ringo, and the Beatles had already broken up. They did all their best work in their 20s. But hey, that doesn't mean they're done. You know what I mean? I think that my guitar playing and my ability to take a drink of water without bumping the microphone, if anybody's wondering what that sound was, that's a big-ass water bottle you got there. Is that a couple liters? I know,
it's my big-ass smart water. And it's one of the things that makes me happy, because I look at it and I go, wow, that's a really big bottle of water, and I've drank it all today. That means I have not only eaten my Wheaties, my Mulligan stew, 4 basic food groups, but I have also hydrated myself to no end.